Welcome back to our second episode of IDP Guys Lounge, or actually the IDP Lounge. Today, I am joined by Mase, Matt, and Jase again, and we are going to be going over edge tiers for redraft this year. These three guys are the IDP experts. I go to these guys for everything I need. So let's get started. So the first guy we got is Rashaan Gary from Green Bay. He played 16 games, 27 tackles, 20 assists, 9.5 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, and 1 fumble recovery. You guys have him at 2.3 for the tier. What do you guys have to say? Matt, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll go first. I'm the low guy on Rashaan Gary, which is weird. I'm in Wisconsin here. For me, the sacks are obviously great, right? So 9.5 sacks last year. I know Zadarius Smith is gone from the Packers, which means there's in theory more opportunity for him to get there. I just don't see the upside in the tackles that I want. So depending on your league scoring, he perfectly fine player. I had him at tier 3 just because the tackles weren't there. But I understand if you're doing best ball or something where you get a lot of points for sacks, he's someone you want to target.
Jase, you got anything to add?
Yeah, I rarely disagree with Matt, but I'm a big Gary fan. I actually think he's underrated, generally speaking. He had a massive leap from in production from year 2 to year 3. He led all edge rushers in the league in pressure rate, and as we know, pressures are a better indicator of future sack numbers than sacks alone. Not that he was lagging behind in sacks. He had double-digit sacks, establishing himself as a star in the absence of Zadarius Smith. I think the guy's. I think he's got it all. I think he's going to blossom again in year 4. Zadarius Smith is gone. He's got Preston Smith next to him, who again is another underrated player. I think Gary is generally speaking underrated. He was a star last year, and I think he's going to do the same thing again in 2022.
Mace, do you got anything to add to the other two?
Yeah, just out of that, Rashaan Gary was 8th in defensive snaps overall in the Packers defense last year, and he was 3rd in pressures in the league, like Jase was saying. I'm a huge fan of him, and I'm picking him up everywhere, mainly because of his dual designation. Some people are picking him up and using him as a linebacker in sleeper formats, but I'm picking him up and using him as like my DL2 and trying to get, like Jase was saying, that sack upside due to that pressure rate. I think he's only going to take a step forward as this defense starts to gel, especially like mid to late season. He could be someone that definitely pulls you to the playoffs and gets you definitely deep in your league.
Now, I do want to bring up one thing because we do have a couple guys on this list are the 2 positions, linebacker and edge. What do you guys do when you draft these guys? Are you drafting them as a linebacker? Or you draft them as an edge? Or are you hoping that you see him play a little bit of both?
I mean, for me, it depends on entirely on the scoring system in the league. So I'm in a couple of leagues where sacks are valued more highly than tackles, compared to the average. And in those leagues, yeah, by all means, those edge rushers who are still have a position as a linebacker are valued much more. But however, if it's at those leagues where tackles are king, then sacks are rewarded maybe slightly less so. Then yeah, I'm looking at your more traditional sort of orthodox linebackers over people like your Rashaan Gary. And if we're looking at sort of NFL position scoring, then half of the top sack artists from last year, Max Crosby, Joey Bose, etc. Those guys, their position's been devalued for me, really.
Yeah, 100%. Same for me. It's really depending on your league scoring, which is the case for all these dudes, right? Like especially at edge, right? Like if you can get someone who's gonna get 9.5 sacks and only 44 combined tackles, right? Like he's only valuable if you really support, sacks. So depending on your league scoring is where depending on where you sort of put him on your list. And yeah, he is very much underrated. Like you're in real life football points. Like I'm not against him by any stretch of the imagination. It's just a lot of my leagues personally that I'm in are more tackle heavy than they are like the big splash plays, which is sort of why I probably have my bias against him. It's like, yeah, he gets the sacks, but like he doesn't do anything else, which is great for football and it's great for those other leagues. But yeah, Rashaan Gary, he's someone you probably want regardless of what league you're in.
So, Mase, do you have anything to add for that, or did they touch on everything for you?
Yeah, they pretty much hit it all on the head. I like him in shorter roster leagues just because of the dual eligibility if there is the sack upside, but it all comes down to scoring because every format is different for everyone that plays IDP.
Awesome. So we're going to move on to guy number 2 here. Leonard Williams from the New York Giants. He played 17 games. He had 34 tackles, 47 assists, 6.5 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, 1 fumble recovery. You guys had him at a high tier 3. Do you agree with that?
I'll start. Yeah. I'll just say that, sorry, he kind of lines up, over the tackles and on the inside somewhat, more so than outside. He does have games sporadically. Week 3, week 4 of last year, 24, 27 snaps on the outside. So it does happen occasionally. Going to use the magic pixie dust and just say, roster in best ball. But for me, when I want to get a guy that's going to get either tackles or sack upside, I am really looking for those edge guys. They did just draft one of those guys in the draft. The Giants did in Thibodeau. So I'm more likely to spend a pick on him than I would be on Williams.
Yeah, you've nailed it. I really like Leonard Williams. I mean, he's a fantastic player, but I value him much more highly where in those leagues where he has DT or IDL designation. As you said, he lines up at various spots in the league. On the DL, and he's one of those few players that can have different designations in different leagues. But in those leagues where he's got a DI or DT designation, I value him much more highly. In leagues where he has an edge designation, I'm not as high. As a DT, he's fantastic. As an edge, not so much.
Yeah, I feel like tier 3 is probably the right place for him. It's just he's been in the league for a while. We sort of know who he is, right? Like there's not a whole lot of upside when you draft a guy like this. You know who he is, which is a certifiably good professional football player. There's just not, again, a whole lot of room for growth, I think, especially when you look at what the Giants have done and who they've added very recently in the last 2 drafts. So you can probably get him for a good value, but it's got to be a pretty deep league.
So let's move on to our third guy here. He's tier 5, and it's Carlos Dunlap. He played 17 games, 24 tackles, 11 assists, 8.5 sacks, 1 forced fumble. What makes him a 5?
I'll start again because it's very similar sort of vernacular for me. It's just we know who he is. Like the 8.5 sacks obviously is super nice that he pulled through there, but the lack of upside elsewhere is just very reliant on those splash plays, and a lot of the other people we're going to play or we're going to talk about rather. I think just have a greater room for growth. So of all the people we're going to talk about, I think tier 5 is right for me.
Yeah, I'm concerned about his sack to pressure rate last year, and in fact the year before. I like Dunlap actually, and I think he's over the course of his career, he's been a really, really good player. That's probably not in question, but his sack to pressure rate last year was not great, and those are the sort of players that I tend to try and avoid. I don't rely on extreme efficiency year after year, and he's one of those guys that's had that for a couple of years in a row now. I don't mind the landing spot for him too much. The the Chiefs were desperate for edge rushers. They took Karlaftis in the draft, and Frank Clark is not all that. So yeah, I don't mind the landing spot too much, but yeah, all things considered, I'm not massively high on Dunlap for this year. Not as high as others are anyway.
Yeah, maybe in deeper leagues, if you have something where you need a flyer on a stack upside bye week, something like that, take him. I understand that. Last year, towards the end of the year, from week 15 to week 18, he had 3 multi-sack games, one of them being 3 sacks, and that was against Los Angeles. So the snap counts are down. It was at the lowest, I think, of his career, maybe aside from 2011. So you know he's going to be part of that rotation. They're going with the youth, locker room guy, but he might be in between that second and third spot, like you're saying with Frank Clark, because we also know what he is. So they might just roll with a hot hand on a weekly basis. So if you want to roll those dice, my friend, go ahead.
And
Right. As always,
I do want to explain that in order to be a tier 5, they have to be a consensus tier 5 between all 3 of you. So it's a pretty rough tier when you are voted tier 5.
Yeah. I mean, edge. I mean, for me, it's quite a deep spot actually in IDP. There's so many good edge rushers out there, so it's not exactly I'm not being heavily critical of Dunlap as a player. I'm sure the other guys aren't either. There's just so many good edge rushers out there now. It's
it's tough to talk negatively about someone that's been in the league for so long. It's been so good for so long, which is why it's like, yeah, he's just not for me. He's still a good player. He made the list. He's on the board. But it's a deep position.
Exactly. If he's my edge 4 on a team, I'm more than happy with that. But
100%.
I wouldn't want to be relying on him week to week just because I want guys that are going to be playing a lot more than he might do in that team.
Mm-hmm.
So let's move on here to Chandler Jones from Las Vegas. 15 games played last year, 31 tackles, 10 assists, 10.5 sacks. He had 6 forced fumbles and 1 fumble recovery. You guys have him as a consensus 4.
Yeah, I'm not crazy high on Chandler Jones. In fact, I'm quite lower than I think than the average than the consensus on Jones. We know what he did in week 1. He looked like he was going to be breaking the sack record within about the first month of the season. A five sack performance was crazy. Everyone got pretty hyped on the back of that, and he had some other good games over the course of the season, but he also had huge sort of barren spells too. I just think at 32, maybe his best years are behind him. I will say though that I've sort of championed Jones over the course of his career as one of those guys who's been crazy underrated. I think he's been phenomenal. I just think maybe his better days are behind him. I still think he can be good, but again, it's a deep position. Someone's got to drop in these tiers, and yeah, if I'm going to do it for anybody, it's got to be some 32-year-old guy who for periods of last year looked very, very quiet compared to what he's done in the past.
Yeah, if 32 years old is old, then I have a problem. I'm getting to be old myself. I think I was the high guy on Chandler Jones. I just love the landing spot. I don't know, something about that Raiders team just feels like they're trying to capture something, which is exciting to me. Like you said, he's been criminally underrated for most of his career. Like all he does is put up stats. Like I love the fact. I know having other studs in a similar position could be either positive or negative, right? But the fact that he's matching up with like Max Crosby there on the Raiders, I feel like he's gonna have plenty of opportunities to produce, which is kind of why tier 4, like he's a step up from Dunlap for me, which is why tier 4 is probably right. Like he doesn't, like you said, he is 32, getting old. So I feel like if you're in a deeper position, like if you're going to be your edge 3 or again, we always have that silver bullet of best ball. Like I think he's going to be able to put up some stats, but you can't rely on him necessarily week to week. So tier 4 is right.
Yeah, I think I rated him as a tier 3 looking at it's just because of kind of what Matt was saying with the upside there. Yannick Nagaway last year in that same defense got 62 pressures. So I feel like if Jones can do that, he'll be good for you as DL2, DL3 push flex. in redraft formats. If you're trying to hold him for Dynasty, I wouldn't say anything past 2 years. But that's just because I feel like Father Time might catch up with him. We're looking at snap counts. He hasn't had, 2020, he was injured, I'm pretty sure. Aside from that, he hasn't had less than 860 something since 2014. So he's a consistent player. He's always getting after it. He's mostly, all but that year he was injured since 2015, he's had 12 plus sacks every season. And I don't know, maybe he might be revitalized going into this year. So in this year, I'm kind of in on it.
All right. So the next player up is Marcus Davenport, New Orleans. He played 11 games, 23 tackles, 16 assists, 9 sacks, 3 forced fumbles, and 1 fumble recovery. Only playing 11 games, 9 sacks is not bad.
No, 9 sacks is great. And I think this is our first consensus tier 3, or first consensus anything, where I think, well, we all think tier 3 is exactly correct. Like the Saints defense is up and coming. Again, he had 9 sacks in very few games. Like there's not much to not like about him. Obviously, we want some more consistency of being healthy and actually, playing all the games. But like this is a person that would probably be a sleeper for most people. Where if you can get him sort of the middle of rounds. When you're actually targeting defense, someone that might be able to actually win you your league.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Davenport actually. And as I look through the tier, if I'm looking for any one player with upside, no, this is a redraft thing, but if I'm looking for guys who are going to peak during the playoffs, or maybe if we have a few dynasty listeners as well, that's the kind of player I'm looking at. He had a pressure rate of 14.1% last year. When he made his way onto the field, he was a very, very good edge rusher. And I think we saw him take a step forward compared to what he's done in the past. 42 pressures, nine sacks. Like you say, health is the big question hanging over Davenport's head. Otherwise, I think when healthy, the guy was really very good. And I think a lot of the IDP community started to catch on a little bit looking at his ADP from recent mocks. So I'm a big Davenport fan, and I think if there was an upper end of the tier 3, he's in it for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like him a lot. Last year, according to Fantasy Pros, he finished 21st overall for the defensive line position in 11 games with a 11 points a game average. You like that sack upside. What was it, 9 and 11 games, I think you said, on 42 pressures. If people are sleeping on him and you can get him later in drafts, if you fade the DL2, swoop him up, maybe take an emergency backup just in case if that injury does reoccur. But if you can get him late, definitely take him and laugh at everyone later.
So we're going to go with the first Bosa brother here from the Chargers. 16 games played, 36 tackles, 15 assists, 10.5 sacks, 7 forced fumbles. Will we see a uptick in his numbers with the improved defense this upcoming season?
I feel like 6 years in the league is a pretty decent sample size, and I mean what Joey Bose has proven is he's a very, very good, edge player. And I mean, I'm just looking at his stats here. He maxed out at 12.5 sacks. Like his low was 5.5 sacks, and that was only in 7 games. Like I feel like you can pretty much pencil him in for around 10, 11 sacks and about 45 combined tackles, and that's what he's been for every year of the 6 years he's been in the league, which is why tier 2 is perfect. Like he doesn't have that elite upside of the tier 1 guys, but he is, I think, as safe as a player as we will be talking about from the edge position tonight.
Yeah, I'm a big Bosa fan, and this is not I'm a Charger fan, right? So I'm not. This is not me being a homer. You guys saw that I don't tend to play favorites with the Chargers with Kenneth Murray in our last episode. Joey Bosa is an underrated guy. He's kind of toiled without a sort of a sack partner for a while now. remember seeing some stats from Tom Kislingberry about how much each player represents of his team's pass rush, and Joey Bosa was basically it for the Chargers.
He's the guy.
For years since Ingram sort of fell away and then left the team. So he's a phenomenal player. He's I think 8th in the league in pressure rate last year. Every year he delivers. He's so reliable. Again, the only question mark might be injury history, but you can say that for many players, and injuries are. You can't predict them a lot of the time. So yeah, I'm a big Bosa fan. I think year after year he delivers. You can't really go wrong. High-end tier 2 player for me.
Yeah, I'm all in on him as well. I like him as a DL2. I don't know if I will use the draft capital if I'm in a redraft to take him as my DL1, just because he's pretty expensive. But if you do draft him, please, if there is dual designation, put him in your defensive lineman slot.
So can I ask real quick? I'm gonna take Grant's job away from him for a second. So why tier 2 then versus tier 1 for you guys?
Well, yeah, if I can get him, he's a tier 1 player. I will say that. Well, he plays at a tier 1 level, gets tier 2 stats, I guess. Yeah. So I just feel like you'll have to spend more in draft capital to get him than someone else. I feel like that you could take later on, and I would feel more comfortable as my DL1, I guess you could say.
I mean, for me to answer that question it's just because this is such a deep position. My tier 1 is elite players. These guys, we'll get into those, I'm sure, but yeah, my tier 2 is still elite players. It's no knock on Joey Bosa at all. I'm happy with anyone in tier 1 and probably anyone in tier 2 to be my DL or edge 1 in any league. So
yeah, I think it's important to qualify. Just like he's super good. He's very good.
Yeah.
I think Mase, what you were saying is like he's an edge 1 that just happens to put up tier 2 numbers. So yeah. I feel like for people that are watching this, like that's important to quantify.
You're right.
All right, moving on to Cameron Hayward here from Pittsburgh. He 17 games played, 53 tackles, 36 assists, 10 sacks, and he was 1-1 for fumble recoveries and forced fumbles. Good running mate for TJ Watt.
100%. I was the high guy on Cam Hayward. I just talk about people that are underrated. Like all he does, especially for where you're gonna get him for ADP, is heckin' produce. Like all he does is get sacks and get tackles, and he's not a sexy pick. Like he's always just there. But I feel like where he's being drafted, you're just getting great value. So maybe I went too high. Maybe I went too high on him. But it's just at a certain point, you want people that are going to produce, and all he does is produce.
Yeah, I've got you've nailed it. I've got very, very little to add to that. Really, the guy he's been fantastic for forever and a day. He's superb. If I had a knock, he's 33, and he spends a lot more time inside than a lot of these other guys we're talking about here. In most leagues, I see him as a DT rather than as an edge. But these are, he's productive no matter what position he's designated in fantasy leagues, and yeah, big Hayward fan.
Yeah, I like Hayward. Just looking at his stats and comparing him to Bosa, who we just talked about, they're somewhat similar in being around the top 50s, low 60s in pressures, and then sacks around anywhere from 14, 11, and then he had one season in 2020 where he was down 5. But you get a lot of value out of him, especially in redraft, because you can take him later and feel comfortable slotting him in that DL2 because he's going to give you consistency. He's a consistent tackler as well. He racks up assists. He really just does it all. He's like the heartbeat of that defense, I feel like. So I'm a stand for him. I love him in redraft, and I'll even get spicy and take him in Dynasty for the next 2 years, though I feel like next year we might see a down crease. He might not play as much.
Down crease. Yeah. I've heard it. That's definitely.
But yeah, he's superb, and he's one of those guys that I target in those leagues where I feel like I've got a team that's near near to competing or on the sort of precipice of winning a championship. Even if it's in Dynasty, again, I know this is redraft, but if I'm close to winning and I need to sort of take a gamble on a guy who's aging, the Cameron Haywards, the Von Millers, I know these guys are going to produce well into their 30s, and he's that sort of guy. Interestingly, I noticed he had the 5th most pass rush attempts of any edge and interior defensive linemen combined last year. So yeah,
like sometimes you don't need the player that's going to go off to be a top 5 dude, right? Like sometimes you just need a player that's going to probably finish in the top 15, maybe top. Like you just need that consistency, and that's been Cam Hayward forever. I don't see that stopping this year.
So let's move on to Marcus Golden here from Arizona. 16 games played, 33 tackles, 15 assists, 11 sacks, 4 forced fumbles, 2 fumble recoveries. You guys have him at a high tier 3.
I don't know, and maybe it's just me, what's happening in Arizona on their defense. Like we've lost key pieces. You have linebackers that are now lining up at safety. There's a lot happening there. So I was lower on him. He had a huge year last year, right? 11 sacks, 48 combined tackles. Like definitely stuff where if you had him last year, you love him. For me, why I had him in tier 4 was just there's so much happening there where I don't feel like last year is necessarily the new norm, and there's enough variability where I like some of the stability from the tier 3 and up guys more than him. But obviously, if he can do what he did last year, he's going to be a heck and find for you.
Yeah, I think I put him in tier 4, Marcus Golden. I'm not crazy about the guy. He's not a bad pass rusher. He's been sort of moderately productive, a couple of double-digit sack years over the course of the last 5 or 6 years, including last year. But there's a lot of other players, and again, I keep saying that I'm a bit of a broken record, but there's a lot of other edge rushers that are more appealing to me than Golden, and that's largely because the position's so deep. I'm not enamored with him. Again, high pressure rate last year. High sack to pressure rate, and those are the sort of players that I tend to shy away from. Not avoid, but I drop them in my rankings a little bit.
Yeah, Mase, you were the high guy. Give us those facts.
Yeah, I know, right? Way to leave me in there, gently. No, I just the thing that sticks out the most to me is like you were saying, Jase. He's got in the last 3 years, he's got over 44 pressures each of those years, and then 2 of those years he's got 11 and 12 sacks. And the thing that I was saying that sticks out the most is that it happened in 2 different places. So he's going to roll with the punches. He's going to be able to do a lot of things. For Dynasty, probably not. But I just feel like this guy falls so far that if you really fade the position and forget about it, you could probably pick him up in the last round of your draft. And I mean, you might not feel happy about it, but you could feel a nice warm and fuzzy on some of the weeks because he does get consistent pressures. But like you were saying, Matt, I can see where that entire defense is just like an egg in a whisk. You have no idea what's going to happen. It's all beat up, and you kind of hope it turns out. So,
which maybe that's a good thing for him, right? Like, maybe that's more opportunities. I think that tier 3, tier 4 is the spot where like you take a flyer at the end and maybe it works out for you.
Yeah, I mean he's only averaging around 600 snaps in the last 2 years, so like 630. So that's not really someone that you want as your DL 1 or 2.
Yeah, right? He's not your golden ticket.
I feel like you deserve a round of applause for that one, Matt.
No, please don't support that kind of behavior. It's not gonna end well. I think, Grant, I lost your audio. Can anyone else hear you?
I'm sorry.
There he is.
There he is.
So Jadeveon Clowney we had 14 games, 24 tackles, 13 assists, 9 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, 0 fumble recoveries. You guys have him at a high tier 3. And what I was trying to say before you guys let me know I was muted, is he still living off that one hit against the Michigan player where he scooped up the ball one-handed, because he's not producing like he should be.
What a hit, though.
He's
Are you a Browns fan?
I am a Browns fan. But I'm
What
happy
a
to have
hit.
him on the team.
Clowney for me, I saw him at the start of last year and I thought, is this because obviously the year prior he'd had no sacks at all, right? And that was kind of forgotten about, because he is a sort of player he was at the front and center, for that hit, as you mentioned, when he entered the league, and he's kind of been good for spells, but not amazing. And those sort of players tend to get forgotten about. People move on quickly, and I think he's been good over the course of his career, but never quite reached that level that we expected him to, or certainly not for a guy taken as high as he was. First overall pick, big expectations. But I watched him at the start of last year, and I thought, has he got it all together? He had something like 6 or 7 sacks in the first maybe 7 or 8 games. I'm not looking at the stats right now, so someone can quote me if I'm or tell me if I'm wrong. And then he disappeared for a long spell, and I kind of wondered where he went. He got it back towards the end of the year, but again, it was just typical Clowney, really. He's never quite put everything together, and for that reason, I think he's been in the league long enough now. We know who he is. He's knocking on 30. I just don't think he's never going to be an amazing edge rusher. He's always just going to be serviceable. If I've got him in my edge 2, maybe a high end edge 3, I'm okay with that. But anything more than that, if I'm expecting more than that, I'm going to be disappointed.
I've always questioned this guy's engine. It seems like when he's needed, he's not out there. But I guess that's what that's the baggage that comes with Jadeveon, and you got to know it at this point in his career.
Show us your biases. For me, I think we often have a negative sort of tint on Clowney because the expectations were so high, like almost to the point where even if he were up top 5 every year, it's like you still wouldn't be meeting expectations somehow. I remember when he came into the league, it was like he's gonna be ridiculous. I think the end product is he's fine. He's fine. I think part of my excitement with him, and when I say excitement, tier 3 excitement, is that I see a lot of improvements on the Browns defense, and I think he can be a part of that, because I think when he's engaged and he's playing in meaningful games, and the spotlight's on him, he does show up, right? And I think part of when he disappears is when the spotlight's not as much there. Seeing a begrudging nod from Grant. So I think I think the Browns are in a spot where they quasi need him, but also they don't need him as much because y'all have invested a lot of resources into your defense. So I think tier 3 is right. Why I have him in tier 3 is the ADP's fallen off. Like, people are avoiding him. They're actively avoiding him. It's like he's not that bad to actively avoid him. Like, he's going to get stats. I kind of like Jase, what you were saying as your edge 2/3. I'm good with him.
Yeah, I like his pressure rate. I like he's staying in Cleveland, right? Yeah. Okay, I said that. Rub that in. Sorry, Grant. But his missed tackle rate is like 21% or something like that. So that's something that's concerning. But I mean, 53 pressures in the amount of games that he played, that's not horrible. So yeah, DL2, DL3, but I don't know, buyer beware.
So we're going to move farther south in Ohio to Trey Hendrickson, the Cincinnati. 16 games, 21 tackles, 13 assists, 14 sacks, 3 forced fumbles. You guys have him at a consensus 2.
Yeah, Hendrickson is wow. What a year, right? I remember looking at him as he played in his last year for the Saints, and sort of wondering whether he was going to live up to the contract he got in the move to the Bengals, because he kind of just barely played for the Saints until that 1 year when he was superb. And I always wonder whether these guys are going to be able to sustain that sort of productivity year on year after only having done it for 1 year. But I remember looking at his figures for last year towards the end of the season and thinking, I was looking down the sack column, and there was barely a week when he didn't have a sack. I think there was like 2, maybe 3 weeks where he failed to record a sack early in the season. I think from like week 4, 5 onwards, he recorded at least a sack or a half sack in every game.
What a scrub!
Incredible. What he lacks, he'll offer you nothing in tackle numbers. His tackle efficiency is dreadful. He's like a Yannick Nagaway type player in that sense, but better as a pass rusher. I don't have the numbers in front of me, so terrible planning preparation on my part, but I would be surprised if he broke sort of 20 tackles last year. He was if you're in a league that rewards tackles higher than average, then avoid. But if your league relies almost entirely on sacks, as they should do for edge rushers, then Hendrickson is your man. He's very, very good.
Yeah, he had 34 combined tackles, 21 solo tackles. So, Jase, that's some points to you for just instinctively knowing 20 was the number. But I mean, you nailed it. Like he's done it now in 2 different spots, right? So for the Saints and for the Bengals, the Bengals didn't really add much that's going to impact his role on that defense. And again, with that contract, he's going to be a part of it. As we've alluded to multiple times now, to get into tier 1, it takes a very, very, very special player. For me, this is someone that's very high on that tier 2 list, where sort of knocking on the door of tier 1. So if you end up, waiting for your edge, I would be happy to have him as my edge 1.
Yeah, I like him a lot. I like the guy that's on the other side of the line a little bit more, just because he provides more stability. But if you are going for sacks and pressures, quarterback hit, things of that sort, you definitely got to take him as your DL1. If you're looking for tackles, then let someone else deal with the headache, because you're not going to be very happy if you invest low-end pick on him.
Yeah, and kind of like Jase, what you were saying with edge, typically if you're drafting in a league that has the edge designation, you are looking for that sack uptick, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I think that's why he's good for this year too. I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, Mase. As you said, Hubbard and Hendrickson are sort of chalk and cheese, really, aren't they? Hubbard's the guy who's going to get you a high amount of tackles. He's not a terrible pass rusher, but he's going to get you really good tackle numbers for the position. His tackle efficiency is through the roof, whereas Hendrickson is the exact opposite. He'll get you screw all tackles, but he'll get you loads of sacks. Question for you guys then: do you think Asai last year he looked really good in the one preseason game he managed before he got injured? I think he might have sacked Brady. Again, someone correct me if I'm wrong, but do you think he's going to eat much into the snap numbers of Hendrickson and Hubbard this year?
I don't really think so, personally. I think those guys are too good together. I mean, they'll put him in a fine spot for him, no doubt. Why wouldn't you? But as far as I'm not sure about Hubbard's contract, but I know Hendrickson, they just kind of invested in him, right? So they're going to keep him out there until the wheels fall off.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to – I mean, I think invariably it's going to impact some of their playing time, but not enough to warrant a drastic decrease in their value.
So moving on to Yannick Naguaque from Indianapolis, 17 games played, 17 sacks, 11 assists, 17 tackles, 11 assists, 10 sacks, 2 forced fumbles. You guys have him at a high tier 3. Jase, you compared him to our previous player.
Yeah, I think at this point in his career, he's like a poor man's Trey Hendrickson, really. He won't get you the sack numbers of Hendrickson, but his tackle numbers will be fairly similar. I don't like the word sack artist, really, but I think I've used it. This is the second or maybe even third time I've used it in the last half hour, so maybe I do. Who knows? But yeah, I'm not crazy about Ngakwe. I've been burned by him in the past. I've owned it partly because I've had Ngakoue on fantasy teams in the years where he's had down years, and I haven't had him in the years where he's had up years. So this is perhaps avoid my opinions on Ngakoue based on the fact that it's very
personal
subjective,
vendetta.
Yeah, I got a personal vendetta.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it is. He is what it is. He'll get you a bunch of pressures. He'll get you. He might break double-digit sacks. He's a serviceable player. He won't get you any tackles really compared to others. I don't know what his tackle numbers were last year, but again, I'm imagining they were in the Hendrickson range, very small compared to other edge rushers. Yeah, so 28.
Yeah,
So he's
28 combined. 28 combined. 17.
I think he was pretty healthy most of the year, so he's not even averaging 2 tackles a game. It's pretty poor. But again, you're not looking for that in an edge player. So if you're in a league that where tackles matter, Ngakoue is not your guy. In a league where pressures matter, I'd be happy with him as an edge 3.
Yeah, I don't have much to add to that. Just again, I have a propensity to appreciate tackles, especially in edge, because sacks are such a hard game to sort of predict. So his best years, he has 10 sacks, which is, again, very good, but not at the elite upside sort of tier. And when you don't have that base of tackles, I typically find myself liking other players more, which again, tier three, like you said, that's about right. I can't really see him making the leap up.
Yeah, I don't see him really taking the leap up at all. But one thing that is kind of like I was looking at in 2018 when he was with the Jaguars. Actually, I'm sorry, 2019 he had 31 tackles, only 2 assists. They have DeForest Buckner now. He's a Colt. So maybe he'll get more runs to the edge, things like that, because of the defense and the way that they run. I know they also have Kwity Paye on the other side. I think he was like 62nd in pressures or something. So this is kind of, I think I was the highest on him with the tier 3. I think you guys both put him in tier 4. It's just more of like a call to arms. I really hope that you can take that step up and kind of be not the alpha on there, because I feel like Buckner's still going to be the alpha on that line. But maybe the Bravo that can come in and kind of swoop everything up because of the madness.
Sure.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, apart from Paye, they don't really have a lot else there at the edge position to sort of challenge Ngakoue for playing time. So yeah, that's a really good point, Mase.
So moving on to the next player, Duane Smoot. You guys have him as a consensus 5. He only 22 tackles, 14 assists, 6 sacks, 1 forced fumble, no fumble recoveries.
Yeah, for me, the Jaguars have put a lot of money in new defensive players. Duane Smoot, which is just a dynamite name, by the way, Smoot. He's been on the team for 5 years, has not really cracked much of anything compared to the rest of these guys. He's a tier 5. He's one of the elusive tier 5s where we all agree.
Yeah, I think he's destined just to be a rotational guy. They spent the first-round pick on the edge, and he didn't look that bad last night. I don't know if you guys caught the game.
Mm-hmm.
He was pretty good coming off the edge. Cool rounds, he had a nice little swim there too going. So, yeah, Smoot's definitely going to be taking a back seat. I feel like he's not going to see the 675 snaps or 665 that he saw in 21 or 2020. I think that they were just kind of forcing guys there and flipping them around, because when he first got there, he was averaging like 200 snaps in his first 2 years. So, not very excited about the opportunity, and I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, he was probably average, below average as a pass rusher last year, 50 pressures or so. But like you say, Mase, he had 676 snaps last year. He's unlikely to see that again with the competition there at on the Jags. So yeah, I'm pretty happy having him as a tier 5 guy. I'm not massively keen on him this year.
But a tier 1 name. Tier 1.
Oh yeah.
So
for ranking names, he's right up there. Maybe with Brian Burns and Max Crosby with about 7 X's.
Yeah, that's our next one. Once drafts have happened, we can just go through names and it'll be good.
So we're going to stay in Jacksonville with Josh Allen here. 16 games, 46 tackles, 25 assists, 7.5 sacks, and then 1 fumble recovery, 1 forced fumble. You guys have him at a mid 2 tier. Mase, you have him as a number 1 tier. And the other two have him as a number 3. What makes him a number 1 in your eyes?
When he first got in the league, he was creating havoc. 2020, he felt an injury. 2021, he got up there, but he's never really had that assistance or help, as we were talking about with the tier 1 name, Smoot. I think they also had Chase on, I believe is his name, was also there. Didn't really do much. So I feel like with the rookie coming in and the adjustments made a linebacker, they paid a couple of guys, and then they drafted Chad Muma as well, who looked semi-decent last night, some errors, but I mean, you expect that out of a third-round pick. So, and I feel like if there's ever going to be a year, it's going to be this year, and the year that he needs to get paid. And that, I don't know, he's always kind of been my guy, man, and he always gets disrespected because when you say Josh Allen, you don't think of him, you think of the other Josh Allen. So, like, I have to come out and explain that, no, I'm talking about the defensive end Josh Allen. They're like, what? I'm like, bro, this guy's so raw. Like, he's really, really good at football. It's just you don't know him because he's been held back due to injury. And he's just not a huge name because no one knows what's going on with the management that is Jacksonville up to this year.
Mm-hmm.
Why does Matt and Jase have him at a number 3 then?
I'm confused as hell about Josh Allen's year last year. Right? He was amazing out of the gate. He had 39 pressures and 6 sacks in his first 9 games. That momentous game against his namesake in week 9 or 10, where he had 5 pressures, a sack, interception, fumble recovery, and 6 tackles. He looked like the best edge rusher in the league for that game.
And wasn't an interception for a touchdown, so it was literally Josh Allen to Josh Allen.
Dude, nuts.
What a game, right? The second half of the season, he completely disappeared. He had 11 pressures and 2 sacks in his last 7 games, which meant that he ended up with fairly similar numbers to the ones he had in his rookie year. So I've definitely not closed the door on Josh Allen. I just I've tempered my expectations a little bit. I don't think Walker's arrival is going to really hurt Allen at all. It's going to be Smoot. That's whose reputation always is playing time is hurt most by Walker's arrival, I think. But I've just tempered my expectations a little bit for Allen now. He's not new anymore. He's been in the league for 3 years. I wouldn't be surprised though if Mase is right and if 2022 is his best year. Just needs to really get back to where he was in the first half of the year.
Yeah, I had him as lower because as a Patriots fan, I am biased against Josh Allen's and what they do to my real and my fake fantasy teams. I think what everyone said is about right. I think the tier 2 is about right. Like he offers the nice sacks with the tackles that you expect, and like you said, with the new additions to the Jaguars defense, I don't think we're really impacting Josh Allen's playing time or opportunity. So he's gonna have those opportunities. I think when it comes to sleepers here, he's definitely one that So part of the reason why I had him so low is people often talk about him like his rookie year was just yesterday with all that upside. It's like, well, it's been a couple years since then, and he hasn't quite made that leap yet. So people are typically drafting for the name, for better or for worse, which is why I'll typically let someone else. You can take that cheese. You go after them. I'll go after someone else. But for the right price, this could very well be the year that he makes that leap up.
So staying in the state of Florida, Emmanuel Agboz next, 17 tackles. 17 games, 26 tackles, 15 assists, 9 sacks, 1 fumble recovery, and 1 forced fumble. You guys have him at a high tier 3.
Yeah, Ogba's an interesting guy, right? He's had pretty much identical stats in the last 2 years. And I kind of like guys like that. You kind of know what you're going to get as long as there's not been too many sort of personnel changes, and he's playing on a team where there's not been too many personnel changes at his position. So yeah, I kind of like Ogba. I'm not crazy about him, but he's he's a consistent, decent edge rusher. His pressure rate hasn't compared favorably with the best in the league, but again, he's not a terrible player. He does what he does. He gets a decent amount of tackles, gets a decent amount of pressures. He's had double-digit sacks for 2 years in a row, just about. Yeah, he's okay. A bit streaky. All edge rushers are.
Yeah, 100%.
Our graphic is wrong here. He is a tier 3, but I accidentally put him as a tier 2. That is on me.
We can pivot. We can pivot. Man, I really like him now. Yeah, he's definitely a tier 2 player. No, I think everything Jase just said is right, and earnestly, I prefer another LB/edge from the Dolphins more than him, which we're not really going to talk about, which we will talk about once we talk about people we're not talking about. I like Jalen Phillips a little more than him for the upside purpose. Like we know who this guy is. He's very serviceable. He's not going to be a bum on your team by any stretch of the imagination. Just he's not gonna win you any week. He'll just be sort of a bye week filler.
Yeah, Mr. Consistent, I guess. I mean, you kind of know what you get with him. Kind of even Stevens, the last 2 years have looked the same. Like Jase was saying, he averaged 7.9 points last year according to Fantasy Pro. That puts him as the DL 18. So if you saw him as your DL 2, I mean, you might miss some weeks, but most weeks you're going to feel like, well, all right, okay, I feel cool. Like you're not going to be tossing him out or nothing. And I feel like you really don't have to spend that much draft capital and redraft in order to get him on your roster.
So moving on to Cameron Jordan here. 16 games, 38 tackles, 21 assists, 12.5 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, no fumble recoveries. You guys have him ranked mid-tier 3.
Yeah, hate to play the age game again, but I mean, talk about consistency, right? As a player, like his worst year in the league after his rookie year was 7.5 sacks, which is nuts. And I mean, he's averaging about 10 sacks a year, about just looking at it, 50 combined tackles. Like you're not going to get much more than that. You're not going to get much worse than that, which puts me in that tier 3. Like typically in that tier 2 and higher, there's at least the chance that they're going to produce at the top 10 level. Whereas this person sort of Jordan's just destined to be between 15 and 25, which again, there's a place on your roster for that person. Just to get higher up, you need a little more upside for me.
Yeah, he's you've nailed it there, Matt. With he's done it all for the entirety of his career. He's been a super player for the Saints, and I can't really add much more to what you said in terms of how good he's been over the years. But this is I'm being a bit brutal now. This is a redraft article, and despite the fact he really came on towards the end of the year and it was fantastic in terms of his sack numbers. His pressure rate wasn't through the roof. He was again very, very efficient with his pressures towards the end of the year. But I'm not all in on Jordan anymore. His pressure rate actually was lower than I think like 40, 50 other players. I should have the exact numbers on me now, but it was below 10%, which is the sort of the threshold I look for in an edge rusher for my fantasy teams, and that's concerning. So yeah, 33 years old, starting to drop off a little bit. Still good sack numbers, but the pressures have gone right down. It spells concern for me. I'm probably out on Jordan compared to most.
Yeah, so he was the DL5 last year. He has been consistent, but I guess I'm kind of just in the same boat. With the age, I mean, you never really know what's going to happen. Although I feel like he does kind of take some tackles away from that linebacking core because they're not really solidified either. So for redraft purposes, if you slot him in as like a DL3, you get him late. If he falls down the board, he can give you that DL2 upside where you're going to be like, yeah. But some of those weeks, like in week 1 last year, he didn't have any tackles. He didn't have anything, man. He had, I guess, 2 quarterback hits on 4 total pressures. So he's going to have those dud weeks, and you're really not going to feel good. But when you hit him, or he has those hit weeks, you're going to feel like you hit the jackpot.
Yeah. I bought the numbers up in the end, and he's something like 80th in pressure rate at the edge position, which is is concerning. But he plays so much that's kind of hidden behind his snap count. I genuinely don't think he's the best pass rusher on his own team any longer. But I'm often wrong, so maybe I am again.
So for these, I want to pair these next two up. It's Jonathan Greenert and Josh Sweat. Their numbers are pretty similar. Greenert played 12 games, 23 tackles, 10 assists, 8 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, 0 fumble recoveries, as Josh Sweat was 16 games, 19 tackles, 26 assists, 7.5 sacks, 1 forced fumble, no fumble recoveries. Both players are a consensus 4 for you guys.
I don't really trust either player, honestly. There's so much turmoil going on in Houston, so much turnover. They're bringing in new guys. So I really just don't want any piece of that pie. And it's kind of the same thing with the Eagles. I don't even know if Sweat is even a starter anymore. I'd really have to do a little bit more digging on that. There's just too much history, and I'm not really in a lot of leagues that it would be deep enough for me to require someone like Sweat's assistance.
For me, not that dissimilar really. Two young guys actually that I'm willing to take a bit of a gamble on in fantasy, but as long as I don't have to invest too much. Greenert, came out of the gate really hot last year when he was playing. Anyway, his sack numbers were crazy to begin with. He kind of tailed off a little bit. Again, I bang on about sort of pressure to sack rate, and his pressures were not crazy high, where his sacks were really impressive, and that's a little bit of a red flag for me. But he does interest me this year, Greenert, as a young guy who could take that next step forward. We'll see how he goes. His PFF pass rush numbers were crazy high. Those guys do know what they're talking about. So I'm interested, but I'm not going overboard. Sweat's a guy I feel like I write an article on Sweat every year, talking him up. And I was ready to eat sort of humble pie last year. Then I saw sort of his end of season numbers, and they were pretty good. And then I saw how many pass rush opportunities he had, and his actual pressure rate was not quite what I thought it was. So I thought, I'll dig that humble pie out and actually eat it when I should have done in the first place. So yeah, he's an interesting guy, Sweat, really interesting guy. If you look back through his sort of college career, athletic sort of freak. I hesitate to use the word. I can't think of anything better right now. But he's been, throughout his career, he's been superb. Some horrific injuries, obviously, that he's overcome. But again, he's a player I've not closed the door on. Still quite young in that sort of edge 3 spot for me. Same with Greenert. Really happy to have a guy with some upside who could sort of hit his stride towards the end of the year when I need him to deliver his best.
Yeah, they're both about the same sort of player to me. Obviously, Sweat has been around a little longer, so we have a better idea for what expectations are. Greenert had like you said, a very, very good start last year, and sort of carried off. So I think tier 4 is right. If you're in a deep enough league where you can warrant some unknown production for these young players, they're probably worth taking a gamble on in that deeper format, just because they have the ability to flash 10 sacks or so, but neither really have the tackles that I'm looking for the higher tiers. So I think y'all nailed it.
So we got Brian Burns up next from Carolina. 17 games played last year, 31 tackles, 19 assists, 9 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, no fumble recoveries. You guys have him about a mid-tier 2.
Yeah, I expected a bit more from Burns last year, to be honest with you. After he looked really good in 2020. As a pass rusher, I thought he could take that next step forward in his 3rd year and really show us what he had. But he felt a little bit flat. He's still a young guy, only 24. It feels bizarre that he's been in the league for 3 years and he's still only 24. But he hasn't really elevated his game for me from year 2 to year 3, and that's a concern. Let's see what happens year 4.
Yeah, I had him as a tier 2 just because of the consistency from the sacks, right? First year, rookie year, 7.5 sacks. The last 2 years, 9. Last 2 years also cracking the 50 combined tackles. Like there's something to be said for that just plug and play edge guy. Like we've been talking a lot about the variability of sack numbers and all that jazz. Where especially at this edge position, sometimes you're taking a gamble. You just hope the week you start them, they produce, right? There's something to be said for someone like Brian Burns that, like, you kind of know what he's going to do. He's not going to be a goose egg for you that week. I like that consistency, which is why I have him. All right, it's your cue.
Yeah, I really think the reason why people like me just kind of keep holding on and saying, well, I'll just wait another year. I'll just wait another year. It comes down to the defensive coordinator, Phil Snell, and then the head coach, Matt Rule, and how they use him in this defense and the things that he's going to do to support around him. He is a great player. He does have some weeks where he kind of drops off a little bit, but I do like the tackles and whatnot. If I draft, I mean, I'm not really sure where he's going with the ADP right now, but I do feel like he's a top 20 guy. So if I can snag him as my DL2, I'm pretty happy about that.
Yeah, I hear you, and opportunity is king, right? So he was 15th in total pass rush attempts last year amongst all edge players. It's a bit of a concern. He was 53rd in pressure rate, but let's see what he can do.
It's all expectations, right? It's all expectations. Like, is he going to become that elite tier 1 guy? Probably not. Like, unless something drastic changes. But that doesn't mean he's not going to be a valuable player on your team, right?
Yeah.
So moving on to DJ Wonnum from Minnesota, 17 games, 29 tackles, 18 assists, 8 sacks, 1 forced fumble, no fumble recoveries. The only thing keeping him from a tier 5 is Mase. You had him ranked at a 4. So he missed that
missed the memo.
That consensus.
I don't really know, man. I guess it's just because of that line and everything that they have going on where he's at. He is kind of taking a back seat. They did get Demarcus Smith as well. So his snaps might go down, but just because of all the madness, he might be the lesser of the evils when he is on the field. So he might be a targeted player in any sort of game. So, I mean, obviously don't go out there and seek to get him or, trade the farm or anything to pick him up. But I don't know. He's a tier 4 guy. It is what it is.
Yeah. Tier 1 name. Tier 1 name. You sort of mentioned it. The addition of Smith, I think, of who we're going to eat into playing time on the Vikings is not Danielle Hunter. So I think it's Wonnum. And even the first couple years in the league, there's not much there to super excite me over the other people, right? Like, you're looking to get into tier 4. Like, I much prefer like a Chandler Jones type of a player over him, which is why I had him in the tier that I did.
Yeah, I'm all out on Wonnum. I think he's been vastly overrated in fantasy. Only Max Crosby had more pass rush attempts than Wonnum last year, and yet Wonnum finished 103rd in pressure rate amongst all edge rushers. That's 102nd. Sorry, don't want to begrudge him that one spot. He's an abysmal edge rusher. There's no two ways about it.
So I'm going to combine these next two as well. Sam Hubbard and Shaquille Barrett. Hubbard had 16 games played, 33 tackles, 29 assists, 7.5 sacks, 1 fumble, 1 forced fumble, 2 fumble recoveries, as Barrett had 15 games played, 37 tackles, 14 assists, 10 sacks, 3 forced fumbles, 1 fumble recovery. You both have both of these guys are ranked high tier 2. And Mase, you had them both at 2. Matt and Jase, you had them both at 3.
Yeah, I feel bad. Sorry, come on, Mase.
Okay. I like Sam Hubbard. I feel like I think he averaged more points last year overall than Trey Hendrickson, as I was talking about earlier. So I like him. And then Barrett's just a guy who I feel like still has, the keys on that defense. That pressure rate is really something that gets you excited. He has multiple sack weeks. I don't know. He's just a package. He has been in the league for a while, since 2015, but I don't really see the total snaps going down, as he only had 768 last year. So even if they do use him in a rotational standpoint, I feel like he's still going to put up the same numbers with that defense, because they didn't really make any major changes, I feel like, as far as personnel goes, right? Like, didn't they lose like a corner maybe? This side, like, as far as the line goes, they got Vea back. So I think they're looking all right.
Yeah, I think Hubbard. I think there's if tackles matter, tackles always matter in leagues, then he's going to be one of the most well, that's not true, but he's going to be a valuable player in your league, because very few other edge rushers are going to get the same amount of tackle numbers as Hubbard, and he's a steady but not phenomenal edge rusher. Certainly not compared to. I feel bad for him, actually. Everyone compares him to Hendrickson because they're on the same team. Hendrickson's a really good pass rusher. So Hubbard tends to look a bit tame in comparison, but he's no slouch in that department. He delivers each year. His numbers are not bad. Who was the other player? Sorry, Grant.
Shaquille Barrett.
Oh, Barrett. I love Barrett. So he's one of the most underrated players, edge rushers, I think, that we'll probably talk about today. I think over the course of the last 3 years, only Aaron Donald has got more pressures than Barrett. 43 sacks in the last 3 years is insane. I kind of followed him since he was at the Broncos. One of my best friends is a Broncos fan. And so whenever the Chargers were playing the Broncos, I'd always keep a close eye on the Broncos players and see how they would fare. And Barrett's one of those guys that just kind of came from nowhere, undrafted, kind of criticized for a lack of athleticism. I love a rags to riches story. Who doesn't, right? So I think he's got plenty left in the tank. Only 29 years old, 30. One of the most underrated edge rushers on our list today.
If I'm not mistaken, Shaquille is also labeled as a linebacker in some leagues, right? So does that change anything as far as drafting him, or is that another thing that depends on the league?
It was. Sorry, Karen, mate. I've talked too much already.
No worries. Everything depends on the league scoring, right? So I think he's a higher rated edge guy than linebacker, because typically when you have the linebacker designation, they sort of deprioritize tackle scoring, right? Because your traditional linebacker gets a bunch of tackles. Whereas if you can get him in an edge league, he provides a floor of tackles, which is very different than many of the edge people we've talked about so far tonight, where you're gonna get some points, and then you also have that potentially double-digit sack number, right? So yeah, I think Jase, you nailed it. Barrett is often slept on. Like, if I had to have him as my, edge 1 or 2, I would Grin and Barrett. That's for y'all. That's for the friends out there. Whereas I'll just put my 2 cents in for Sam Hubbard. I think y'all nailed it. We know who he is. He's a much better professional football player for the Bengals than he is a fantasy player. Again, he's not going to put up a goose egg, which there's a time and a place where you just need someone that's going to be out there and playing, right? But he's not going to necessarily win you any leagues. I don't know if y'all agree with me on my edge versus LB take. Please disagree.
No,
when I'm going for defensive linemen, I'm definitely going for sack upside. When I get linebackers, I want guys like Nick Bolton, tackling machines. Anything other than Kenneth Murray, right?
You got it.
All right, so I had to split tier 1 up. We have 5 guys in tier 1, but we have 3 guys that stand at a whole nother level from the other 2. So we're going to start off here with tier 1B. We have Danielle Hunter and Max Crosby. Danielle only had 7 games played last year. He had 23 tackles, 15 assists, 6 sacks, and then nothing in the fumble category, as Max Crosby played all 17, 36 tackles, 20 assists, 8 sacks, and then also nothing in the fumble categories. So do we want to go ahead and reveal the top 3 before we talk about all 5?
Sounds good.
All right. So the next 3 are obviously TJ Watt, Myles Garrett, Nick Bosa. They stand head and shoulders in the sack category, with Watt having 22.5, Myles having 16, Nick having 15.5. As far as tackles, TJ's 48, Myles is 33, Nick Bosa is 40. And then the assists are as follows: 16, 18, and 12. So these guys they're head and shoulders above the other 2, I would say. They deserve an elite tier.
Yeah, especially when leagues prioritize sacks. Like that's enough sacks where it doesn't matter how many tackles you're getting. Like you are consistently scoring. Like typically sacks are worth what, 6 points, which is about what a touchdown would normally call for on the offensive side. Like if you're getting a touchdown every single week, I don't really care what you're doing elsewise. Like you're heckin' elite, and the fact that they do that with other things is a whole thing. So I feel like those top 3 are clearly separating themselves. I know Danielle Hunter is also perennially underrated. I feel like that's a player that just does it all for a Vikings defense, and I don't really hear his name mentioned as much with the other 3. Max Crosby, since we're talking about L5, tier 1 name, 2 X's. How often does that happen? I feel like the end of the year stats for him are never quite as good as I want them to be. Like you look at his stats compared to some of the other people, and you're like, how is he in tier 1? He's on a team that he's going to get his opportunities, and he's always in the mix. But in terms of those 5, I think he's probably 5th for me of those. But I'll pass the mic to someone else.
Yeah, I mean, so a brief bit on each. I know I've got a tendency to just waffle on, but yeah, a brief bit on each. Garrett, there's very little we can say that people won't have already heard about. His 2021 was his best year in terms of pressure totals and pressure rate. He's a young player who continues to improve. I think he's a phenomenal edge rusher. I will say his pressure rate was not as great as it should be, given his sack numbers. I'm not taking away from his performance last year. It was phenomenal, right? And he's a superb player. But I will confidently say that it's doubtful that he'll surpass his sack total from 2021 unless he earns more than 62 pressures. That's very unlikely. But again, I'm not taking anything away from him. He's a superb player, easily in that sort of elite tier. Nick Bosa, amazing what he's done in the last 2 years, right? He's a special player. No player was on this list that we talked about tonight was double teamed more than Nick Bosa last year, which, given his numbers, is really, really impressive, right? So he's a special player too. Who else? Max Crosby. Yeah, you nailed it, Matt. He didn't quite have the counting stats that we want from a player like him, but interesting point. No edge rush. He had there was no bigger gap between the number 1 and number 2 edge rusher in pressures than last year, between Max Crosby with 101 and Rashaan Gary with 81. So I'm expecting a big jump, a big leap forward next year in the number of sacks for Crosby, maybe slightly less by way of pressures. And Hunter, I'll always love Danielle Hunter. I'm desperate for him to stay healthy. When he got injured last year, my heart sank. I'm not a Vikings fan. I don't like to see players especially players that are really good, and that's probably wrong to say, that suffer injuries like the one that he suffered. I just want to see him play again. The last time I saw him, put together that sort of 97 pressure, 18 sack game was something to watch. I really want to see that again. 18 sack game, that would be amazing season.
I was like, wow, hey, dude, this
It gets even worse. Earlier today, I wrote an article that said that Aziz Al-Shaair had 111 sacks last year. That was amazing.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good.
That's Bobby Boucher, man. No, so Hunter, yeah, like Jase, you were saying, I really like him when he's on the field. He really puts up those numbers. But when you get him, you also, I feel like, got to get an insurance policy of the round right after him, just because it's not. I've been seeing him go anywhere from the DL4 to probably like the DL10, just because of the mystery on it. So just be cautious by draft. Max Crosby, pressure machine. Hopefully that defense can kind of pull it together. I know the offense got stronger. Devontae Adams came over, so maybe they can put up more points, bang with more teams, to give Max Crosby more of an opportunity to do things, not just in the sack category, but the tackle category. TJ Watt is an amazing, just phenomenal player, but his ADP is way too spicy for me, man. I'm not taking him anywhere. Not to take anything from him, but to recreate that kind of magic, I would much rather take a flyer on a guy like Nick Bosa. Obviously, I am a Niner fan, and I stand for Thick Nick, man. He is just nasty. He's not of this world. Everything about him, the pressures, the takedown, what he did to Baker Mayfield, swinging the flag, dude, I'll never get over that. He's such an just nasty. And Myles Garrett, the same way. Really, really good, consistent player at an elite level. You're going to pay up for him, but at that price, who really cares? He's a great anchor set for your roster. So if you only have like a DL1 and a DL2, you draft a guy like Garrett, Bosa, Watt, or Crosby, they're going to anchor you down and give you points on a weekly basis. So out of all of them, if I had to pick one of them, obviously Bosa, just because I'm a Niner fan, but for IDP purposes, I think I'm going to take Max Crosby just because his ADP is a little bit further back from everyone else. And his sacks were only 8 last year. So like you guys were saying earlier, do you think that's going to come up a little bit? So for the fall down, I feel really good with him as my DL1.
All right, so that finishes up this this little list here. Who are we missing on this list?
So for me, there's 3 main names that I would expect to be on this list that weren't. One, Jase, you mentioned him earlier, Aziz Ojulari. I really like what he flashed in his rookie year. He's probably in this space, probably a tier 4 guy, but like there's upside there where his rookie campaign, he flashed signs of brilliance, and obviously they added some people via the draft, Kayvon Thibodeau there, for him to work with, and I think that'll up his value. So him, number 1. Number 2 would be Jalen Phillips from the Dolphins. Again, very similar second-year player, flashed signs of being a very good edge rusher towards the end of last year, especially. The Dolphins, we know, have invested a lot of money in sort of everywhere. So for him, I see him making the big leap up this year. And then number 3, I'm a Patriots fan. I can't help but mention Matthew Judon. He had a very, very great start to his year last year. Then he got injured. I forget if it's an injury or if it was COVID, one of the two. And then he sort of fell off the map for the last, probably during your playoffs, right? So it leaves a little negative taste in your mouth. I know the Patriots didn't really add a whole lot in the sense of edge rushers this last year, which to me is actually a negative for Judon, but not enough of a negative to take him off of the tier 3, tier 4 list. He's going to get a lot of playing time and a lot of opportunities, as the Patriots offense I don't think is going to be that good. So those are the 3 for me. I don't know if someone else y'all are thinking.
Yeah, I got a list of maybe 10. I'll only talk about 1 or maybe 2 of them though. Khalil Mack, Matt Judon, as you mentioned, Montez Sweat, Preston Smith. I'll come back to him in a second. We talked about Zadarius Smith, Robert Quinn, Chase Young, Von Miller, Leonard Floyd, Hassan Reddick, and Harold Landry. The one I want to talk about, though, is probably one of the least sexy names on that list. This is Preston Smith. No edge rusher had more pressures in the second half of 2021 than Preston Smith. Darius Smith has left to join the Vikings, so the door's been open for him to play, for Preston Smith to play many more snaps this year. So he is one of my favorite sort of undervalued redraft targets, I suppose. And Von Miller, he proved that he was, still a very, very good player towards the end of last year. And I think in redraft, at least, he's been overlooked a little bit. Yeah, he might not play the same amount of snaps on that sort of Bills rotation they have on the defensive line, but yeah, he's still a very, very special player. So that's my list.
I got Demarcus Lawrence. I'm not really sure of the situation right now, but I just know that last year when he was in, he was scoring big. And then Micah Parsons as well. He had a chunk of his time was at edge last season. I do believe in some leagues he has the DL eligibility. So if he does, put him right up there in the tier 1. And just, I know it's edge, but I got to shout out a couple of linemen. Interior DeForest Buckner, Christian Barrymore, and Sebastian Joseph Day names to get. Also as some back end guys if you really need a sprinkle, because those guys will probably be out there over a lot of these edge guys.
100%.
Yeah, the Parsons call is a great shout, and I was thinking today or looking into some of what we expect him to do this year, and for an IDP Guys article, and yeah, if we're talking about him as an edge rusher, then yeah, he'd easily be in my tier 1, back end of tier 1. Probably not that elite category with the top 3 guys we talked about earlier on, but he's I'm expecting him to. I want to on too much of a tangent to rush the passer as much as he did last year. So yeah, if we're talking about him as an edge rusher, then I don't want our listeners to think that we've completely overlooked him. But yeah, he's a special player.
100%.
Well, with that being said, I think this is a good spot to wrap it up. If you guys found this helpful, make sure you drop a like, hit that subscribe button, even leave a comment. Tell us who we forgot, or who you don't think should be on this list, or who should be higher or lower. But with that being said, make sure you check out our IDP Guys website. Read the articles that Matt, Jase, and Mase write. It's great information. And with that being said, we'll see you guys next time when we rank our next IDP position.
Bye, guys.
See you guys.